So we have a great panel of experts and people that are rooted in the community and are looking to work with all of us on how we, again, have Harlem be a part of what's happening in New York City as a whole. Brittny Sauders works directly in the mayor's office. She works with Maya Wiley, who is the counsel to the mayor on all things, and particularly broadband initiatives. Brittny is an accomplished lawyer herself, and I don't want to get all into her bio. You can read it. You know what I failed to do today is I failed to let everybody know that we have an app, Silicon Harlem Conference app. It's a little late now, but you can get it from the iTunes store or from Android. It'll be good for next year too, by the way. So pick up the app and you can read the bios, or you can go on our website and read the bios of everybody else. Sam Sia, Dr. Sam Sia, he is here from Harlem Biospace. How many people have heard of Harlem Biospace? Good, 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 good. The only wet lab, I think, in New York, and a tremendous force of helping transform Harlem, paying attention to this vital issue. So Sam Sia is here with us. I mentioned Bruce Lincoln, the esteemed scholar, and my co-founder. And at the end there is our honorary co-chair for the conference, Christopher Levendos from Verzon. So we're excited. He's been a partner with us from the beginning. He's been very generous with his skills in helping us with all types of efforts around broadband in this area. Verizon's been aggressive about putting fiber everywhere and making sure that Harlem, like the rest of New York City, can take advantage of that. So he's actually upgraded buildings that we've recommended, and he's created great partnerships by being a part of Silicon Harlem. So we're very proud of our relationship with Verizon, and so we thank him for being a part of the panel. So let's get it started. The topic is envisioning the technological future of Harlem. So I want to start with Bruce. Bruce, if you can kind of frame what that means exactly, and we can kind of start from there.
Thanks, Clayton. So what I'll do is just outline what, in essence, is a procedural methodology. And some of this will basically re-echo what Heather Gates said earlier about the work they do with Connected Nation. But basically, the idea is bringing together a multi-stakeholder group of individuals, such as what we represent here, either within the context of our companies, our nonprofits, or what we're doing individually. And then really thinking about, as we move forward, what are the kinds of things that we want to have technology influence in our lives? And those aren't necessarily technological areas. It's the arts, it's culture, it's schooling, it's lifestyle. But it all ties back to what the internet, as Gary Fowler has said, makes possible because of what it can do as far as our social lives and our affective lives. So what we want to do this afternoon is to have an iterative and interactive discussion where the idea is we're going to start to verbally put together a strategic technology plan. And the idea is that this will basically, in some respects, be specifically focused on Harlem, and in other respects, be generalizable to urban centers.
Very good, yes. So that gives us some jump off. Brittny, if you can talk about this from a New York City perspective, we'd love to hear some of your insight.
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. I bring with me the regrets of my boss, Maya Wiley, who was really, really excited to join this conversation today. But I'm also excited to be here and to discuss our efforts, which I think are very much in line with the framing that you set out earlier, Clayton, in terms of broadband for all. And then also, Bruce, in terms of what you just laid out in terms of like what's the kind of broader landscape against which we should be thinking about the technological future of Harlem. So I'll say a few things about how we think about this at City Hall. And in general, I mean, well, first of all, I'll start with the mayor's commitment himself. So he has been very clear that one of his major goals is trying to guarantee universal affordable broadband across the 5 boroughs. But we think about our broadband work in really 3 big frames. So one is access, making sure that we have the infrastructure in place, whether that's wired or wireless, to make sure that all New Yorkers have broadband within reach. We also think in terms of affordability. So what can we do to create a climate in which all New Yorkers can afford to take advantage of high-speed internet and to use it for the varying multivariate kind of aspects of their lives that Bruce pointed to earlier. And then finally, what can we do as a city to really promote and drive adoption and to be thoughtful of that at each stage? And so we're constantly thinking about what we can do as, the city, what can the city do with its policy-making capacity? What can it do with its investment capacity? What can it do, with its public voice in order to make those goals happen? I'll say a few things about some specifics. I'll say around Harlem in particular, couldn't be here without mentioning the Harlem Wi-Fi network, which we are really thrilled to be partnering on and to be creating a network that's, going to provide seamless service for more than 80,000 residents of the area. We're also, in the realm of access, right, are working now on a RFP process that's going to transform our current network of payphones into wireless nodes to create, more high-speed internet access across the city. There are a couple of initiatives that we are moving with a specific eye. I mean, all of this, I think, we're always very mindful of and thoughtful about how our investments or the plans that we make are impacting all New Yorkers and really helping all residents of the city to advance and allowing for innovation right across the city, not just in certain areas. But there are a few things that we're doing in terms of with a specific eye to meeting unmet needs. So one of those is a pilot that we'll be undertaking with the libraries to provide wireless, personal wireless devices to students who are enrolled in certain after-school programs, and really helping them to take, be able to bring those devices home and be able to utilize high-speed internet and also create a service opportunity for their entire households. We are also, we've identified a number of NYCHA community centers that have not been wired for broadband, and we're going to be making sure that those are brought up to speed. There's just a range of different ways that we're thinking about it, some very kind of micro projects and other kind of larger, broader questions around the climate that we create and the technology that we invest in. But certainly when we do this, we're thinking about how these investments help to move the kind of broader equity goals that we have as an administration. So that's some of the backdrop, and I'm happy to kind of discuss more as we begin.
That's excellent. Excellent. Let's go to Sam. Oh, actually, can I ask you a question, Brittny,
Yes.
about Digital NYC?
Yes.
Very impressed with that website.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about it and how we should be using it?
Well, so I have to say that I guess it's a mark of the city's commitment to these issues that while I'm like a broadband policy person, I am not the person who's kind of the digital NYC. We have a digital director and digital team who could definitely dig into that more. But I would encourage everyone to, check out the website, check out the resource, and really, explore how it might be helpful to you.
Yeah. I would recommend everyone check out Digital NYC. It's great because what they've done is they found a way to sort of aggregate resources that will be good for business owners, good for citizens, but definitely if you have a small business or a startup, there's a lot of resources there you can tap through the Digital NYC website. So very, very strong initiative. Let me go to Sam Sia from Harlem Biospace. Talk a little bit about what, from your perspective, what's the trajectory of Harlem, and what is it going to take for us to get to where you think we should go?
Well, that's a tall order question, so I don't know if I can fully answer that, but I'll give it my best. But first of all, thanks to Clayton and Bruce for inviting me here. It's definitely an honor to be here. We're sort of the new kid on the block. We've only been around for really coming up on our 1-year anniversary, but we've really felt so welcome already in the Harlem community. And really, just to backtrack a second before we go to the future, the whole idea here started because New York City has a huge amount of biotech research going on in universities, actually number 2 in the country behind Boston in NIH funding. But hasn't really been able to capitalize on that research into a booming biotech economy like you see in Boston or the Bay Area. And so when we started working with New York City Economic Development Corporation a couple of years ago on this, the idea was to build an affordable wet lab space that serves New York City. It wasn't a Harlem project. This is something that would serve a lot of the people in the whole region. We were looking at all sorts of areas in New York City, including other boroughs, other places in Manhattan, and we chose to be in Harlem. We didn't have to be here. And, for a number of reasons, but at the end, it just turned out to be, I think, a really inspiring decision, and just feel really welcome here by the community leaders. There are, I think, a couple things that I wouldn't portend to predict the future, but I think there's a couple of touch points relating to some of the themes here. Number one, for the broadband initiatives, in certainly what we do in biotech, we use a lot of data. And there are certain areas that are very hot areas that are really going to grow to be, I think, huge, even bigger parts of the economy. Digital health, for instance, is one area of intersection that's very clear between tech and life sciences. So you can see, all these widgets coming out, Fitbit, now Apple Watch. People are going to move more and more into trying to do diagnostics and more traditional life science technologies onto those devices, and that's going to be an area where I think we're going to be really interested. A lot of people will be interested, and we're happy to host those companies. Other things as well, such as genomics, a large amount of DNA data and so forth, imaging, lots of data. There's a new building going up at Columbia. This $700 million building is going up right now in West Harlem, and there's going to be a lot of new data about the brain and so forth. That's one of the president's initiatives, the BRAIN initiative. And so a lot of that, we really need a lot of broadband. So just in terms of digital, there's a lot of intersections just with biotech. And then the second thing is the more traditional biotech work, which a lot of people traditionally find intimidating almost. It's, tech is hard, but biotech is almost in another, realm in terms of capital requirements. It's usually limited to pharma companies out in certain places, and certainly not in a place, in the middle of an urban population. You see this kind of work being done, and we're trying to make it more accessible. And I think that's really good for a number of reasons. One is it's close to where the investigators are working in, but it's also close to the community. We're showing that the kids from even an early age, and we have this program called Hypothekids, where we're serving kids as young as pre-K all the way up to grade 12, to get them interested not in just writing apps, which is great, nothing wrong with the tech economy, but that biotech is really nothing more than trying to come up with new therapies that would be life-saving, new diagnostics. These are great things, and you can do that as well. And so by pairing up some of our initiatives with the educational initiatives, they get to actually learn the science as well as see how startup companies in the space operate and get inspired and motivated to work on this. But even just for the traditional biotech companies, we've tried to lower the barriers so that they can have an affordable wet lab space here in Harlem. And I think, that's why I think, we've gotten all this press, which is really almost beyond what our little space, even deserves. But on the other hand, I think some of that interest is due to the fact that we, such spaces usually are not in a place like, in an urban area like this. And so, and so I think the future there is we want to expand. We really love what we have seen so far here, and we would want to expand and to be both anchored to a major institution like Columbia, which gives us that sort of traditional scientific, input, but as well be connected to the community like this. And I really don't know of any other space. I just came back from London. They have life science incubators there. I don't know of any other life science incubator in the world that is in an environment like this, and I think we're all going to benefit from it, and hopefully there's some benefit to the community as well.
Can our Silicon Harlem folks visit the Biospace anytime? Is it open for?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have events that are open to the public. You have to get a ticket, but it's free. And you can just go onto our website, harlembiospace.com. There's events there. The tickets are free. you could come. We can only accommodate about 30 people at a time, unfortunately, but we've hosted, I think, 1,000 people already, and everyone's welcome to come. Some of the seminars are more specific towards scientists, but some of them are a little bit more geared towards a general audience. So that's probably the best way you can come and visit.
How many people have visited the Biospace? Okay, not many. Well, let me tell you, I've been there, and I can only speak simple language. I don't have that whole science background necessarily, but these people are trying to solve some serious issues. They're incubating companies that are working on some serious issues. One person came up to me and said, I'm trying to create a sponge that you never throw away. Okay, a sponge that would have no fungus, no nothing on it. Am I right about that?
Yeah, yeah.
So let's move on, because that's enough for me. Chris Levendos, he is from Verizon. Let's hear that perspective from Verizon. When you see a community like this that's committed to driving entrepreneurialism and driving into a tech and innovation hub, okay. So maybe you can just hear me. So the question I have is, does that inspire Verizon? I know you have a sort of a mandate to sort of serve all of New York City, and we are proud of that. But when you see this sort of energy going on here, and this sort of interest, and this sort of startup community, and people who are committed to their community the way we are, how does Verizon respond to that?
Well, it certainly inspires Verizon, inspires me personally. That's why I certainly keep coming back. That's why my colleague Lisa Eve really enjoyed being here this morning. And what it has done for us has been very organic, over our last few sessions together, where we've built real, tangible relationships just out of the conversations that have taken place here. Between Verizon and Silicon Harlem, between Verizon and the Harlem Business Alliance, and working on future incubation projects that will be occurring in Harlem in the coming months, in years. And our focus is on investment. We have been serving the area of Harlem as the former New York Telephone Company for the last 100 years, and we plan on serving Harlem as Verizon for the next 100 years. To do that, we've got to upgrade infrastructure that's going to take us forward for the next 100 years for Verizon, for the constituents of Harlem, for the business owners of Harlem, for the government agencies that serve Harlem that Verizon wants to have as their customers. So we have invested since 2008 over $3 billion in building out fiber optics throughout New York City, inclusive of Harlem. We've got 3 major switching centers that provide local access service through fiber optics to the Harlem community here, one along Manhattan Avenue, one along 3rd Avenue on the east side, and one up on Convent Avenue. We have invested heavily in all of those switching centers and have radiated out fiber optic infrastructure up and down all the major avenues in Harlem and further up into Washington Heights, up into Inwood, where I was born. And in Harlem, where I started my career 25 years ago. So, as I said in previous conversations, I personally enjoy very much being a part of that transformation that we're in the process of going through. And what we need to do is move it along faster. We've been working with the city administration over the last couple of years, trying to work through new process improvements as we're working in the public right-of-way, as we're doing things within the city streets and along the sidewalks. How can we do that faster? How can we, build out quicker and faster and be less disruptive at the same time? So we've come up with some good plans to be able to work that and move that along. So as we're making further investments, we're not disrupting the flow of people and traffic as they move forward. We are, certainly working as projects that we've talked about in trying to drive the awareness into the real estate community for both residential properties and commercial properties, because we're now at the point, all that's kind of holding us back from moving more efficiently is we just need to work through private property permissions. And once we have those, and we have all the sort of ducks in a row, then we can extend infrastructure from the street. And we're making progress every single day throughout all the different sub-neighborhoods within Harlem, but we want to see that move quicker and faster. So that's really what we need to drive through. So we need to work on that from an innovation point of view. We need to continue to figure out different process changes and technology changes so that the building of the network can go faster and more efficiently, but we also need to drive awareness, so where there's really just communication barriers that need to be blocked down so that we can build out infrastructure quicker and really convert all of Harlem from a Verizon perspective over to a complete fiber optic platform as quickly as we can.
Well, that's a big commitment, and thank you very much for that. Brittny, you want to respond to anything you've heard so far? Because I'm curious, maybe even the same question, when you see a group like this and people that are really invested in their community and want to see it, thrive in this economy, how does the city respond to that? I mean, it's just...
I would say along much the same lines. It's incredibly inspiring, and it's, I think sometimes, as you mentioned before, right, I work in the council's office. We've been tasked with moving the broadband agenda, but we do quite a bit of work. We're involved across a number of issues. I think there's always a fear, I think, around some of these broadband issues that, they don't kind of rank, or at least they're not necessarily perceived by everyone as ranking amongst, at the kind of among the top priorities in order for residents of the city to thrive. I mean, I think that's obviously changing, but when we see a community of folks who are really absolutely zeroed in on the importance of this goal, right, who are obviously organizing in and amongst themselves around these issues and who have kind of clear-cut like plans and objectives, it is inspiring and it's energizing, because I will say that a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis is like, just moving too quickly, and I'm, just not necessarily, well, whatever. But this is very inspiring to see people who are organizing and have clear plans and commitments and are deeply committed to these issues that are, deserve absolutely this much attention and much, much more.
So I want to talk a little bit about Silicon Harlem, Bruce. You and I have been on this for a long time. To some, it may seem like we just started, but we've been on this a long, long time. And I'm curious if you can sort of share with the audience, sort of our strategy, what that means, and what that means to a Verizon, what that means to the New York City's office. What part of our strategy is, sort of keeping this inclusive, march that we have.
If you think about Silicon Harlem, one, we're a for-profit social venture, which means we basically have a social mission, but we use tried and true business principles to achieve our goals. And we also apply the fact that we're both very high-end technology developers. So when we craft our four-pronged strategy, it begins with Gigabit Harlem, the idea of how do we work with Verizon and see where they're going with their advances in network technologies, and also where that fits in with what is happening in other places. And unfortunately, Michael Wong just left. He's working in the next generation internet laboratories at Columbia, where they think about the innovations that make the internet work. And one of the things that they're working at the nexus of is how do you advance the fiber infrastructure as well as to keep up with the exabyte use of wireless that we're all a part of. So that requires real engineering chops, if you will. So that's the nexus of sort of Silicon Harlem, Verizon, Google, because you have to have Google involved with what they've been doing with the Google Fiber, but also working with the Columbia University and even the City College, because they do have some of the top electrical engineers in the country, if not in the city. So that's sort of the galvanization and the bringing together that kind of talent. Secondly, it looks at sort of economic development from the standpoint of technology. So that's our second prong, which is what the Congressman is so committed to and has been bringing his policymaker expertise to bear upon, which is how we make sure that Harlem, known for innovation in the arts and culture, in music, is now the place where innovation will be determined based on the fact that we're going to be applying these new technologies in unique ways. The second two prongs of this platform focus on our young people. So that looks at, as Dr. Francis Colon spoke about so eloquently, STEM talent, STEM education, making sure the schools in Harlem are developing the best talent when it comes to STEM, and that we're working in line with the Department of Education, which is pushing coding and pushing STEM education down into the middle schools and down into our elementary schools. So then that, once again, ties into the community, our community boards, our school boards, parents, both our small schools, our larger schools, and our charters. And then the fourth pillar is the creation of STEM entrepreneurs. And towards that end, we've worked with the Caribbean Cultural Center and developed the Apps Youth Leadership Academy, which is also funded by the Harlem Community Development Corp, so that our young people who are digital natives, who eat, sleep, and drink this stuff, they're cord cutters, they watch video over their phones, they actually text more than they talk, are given the opportunity to basically develop their own tech companies. And so within that context, this summer we did the Apps Youth Leadership Academy, where 20 young people out of 70 applications, that's how competitive it was, earned the opportunity to work at City College over the summer under the instructional guidance of Clayton Banks, and they learned how to produce smartphone applications in a matter of 7 weeks. So we put them through an incubator process. So the idea of that isn't necessarily to say, go get a gig in Silicon Valley. It says, you now have the skills that you know you're a top flight student in your senior year, and you have these choices as far as an education. So, but when you bring all those things together, you basically have what equals the platform of this social enterprise. So then what does that leave for everyone to do? You can pick and choose where it complements your goals and your skill sets so that we can come together within the context of this, collective ecosystem.
So that's a lot to chew on, and we're hard at work on all of it. We want to open it up to questions, because I don't want to just be down to like, oh, I only have 2 questions. We're going to let you guys get involved right now. I'm going to start right here with Michael, and then I'll
to Verizon, I'm a property manager in Harlem, and we have said yes to Verizon coming onto the property, but there seems to still be some issues with the properties having access to Bios. How should we best, through your system, remedy those types of problems?
You and I should.
Additionally,
yeah, you and I should talk right after this.
I will.
We'll
Additionally, I have a startup business, and that business also is in Harlem, and we're looking to have faster internet and gigabyte. We're on 125th and Park and are trying to push the whole East Side gigabyte movement.
Right.
So
from this platform, from a previous platform, I got to meet some of the folks from the Harlem Garage, and out of this platform came that relationship, and we went to wire the Harlem Garage and provided them with service for a good period of time to help support what goes on there. Great, we'll be happy to talk to you about the same thing.
I've been promising.
forward to
I've
it.
been promising Michael I would talk to you
Look
about
forward
it.
to it.
So
Yep.
I know where he's coming from.
So my name is Clayton Johnson, and I'm from Texas Instruments. So I appreciate the Silicon Harlem name. But this is a question directed towards Brittny, kind of the city of New York. As Sam was talking about, right, you're trying to reduce the barriers to entry for biotech and, technologies that maybe aren't necessarily super accessible, like making mobile apps and things like that. On the hardware startup side, right, where you're like designing, boards and PCBs, what kind of developments are being done in Harlem to facilitate those advances?
That's a great question. What I can say is that we are in quite a bit of conversation with the folks who do economic development as well on the city side, so both the broadband folks and the economic development folks, to think about how we can kind of overlap those two goals. And we're also thinking about, what sorts of, almost, I guess the way to frame them would be like small scale experiments can we support that are going to, maybe that will provide the necessary infrastructure or space or whatever else it might be to support that kind of innovation and to allow kind of startups to grow with some of the support of kind of cutting edge broadband technology. So it's something that we're thinking about, and we're trying to think about in a thoughtful and integrated way. But it's a great question.
You have a question over there?
My question may or may not be relevant, but I think it's important, and it is addressing, I want it to be addressed by the city, businesses, as well as the founders of Silicon Harlem. We've been talking all day about, application and development. Can you speak about educating the day-to-day consumer, the end user, on how all this works for them?
That is a great point. The kind of slice that we take on this most typically is trying to ensure that New Yorkers are receiving kind of best and most effective and greatest value for their or value in terms of broadband service. So we are often, we do a lot to kind of educate consumers and to understand their concerns and help to address them. But I don't know if that fully addresses your question, but
I'll jump in on that. This is a very good question, and it's one that we take very seriously. Today is an example of that, right? Today was a huge education day where you could learn everything from what's happening, what's next in social media to the Internet of media and things. Some of the concepts talked about today, even with those of us in technology, may have been new. So we brought experts to Harlem, hosting a conference in Harlem, so that this community could benefit from that type of expertise. On top of that, we have monthly meetups where, and quarterly tech talks with Charlie Rangel, where we bring in a top executive from a tech company to talk about, what's happening in tech. So the idea, you're right on the right thing, Broderick, which is, we not only can we talk amongst ourselves, but we've got to get the whole community galvanized. It's one thing to talk to the mayor's office or to go down to D.C. It's another, as Congressman Rangel talked about, it's another thing when you have all of us together talking. That makes a huge difference. And Bruce and I really focused on that, is how can we galvanize the community? And part of that is through education. So it's a great question. Next.
I don't need a mic.
It's being recorded.
oh.
Okay. Hello, I'm Mominatu, and I'm a freshman at Hunter College. And my question is, how is Silicon Harlem different from direct competitors such as NYC Gen Tech and Networking for Teaching Entrepreneurship? What is the innovative way to teach young students to learn to code, learn C++, HTML in a fun and innovative way, unlike just saying, here's a computer, now build an app? Like, young kids don't like learning, they like playing the game. Because teaching coding is very hard. So what are some ways to teach coding?
Well, we do that with the Apps Youth Leadership Academy. But also, if you talked about pedagogy. Pedagogically, we basically do what's called constructivist learning. Doing by playing, learning by doing. So we basically have student-driven workshops. So how that works is they get taught in the morning, hands-on, how to do something that we do as professionals, and then they get given an exercise where they can actually do it themselves and they work in teams. So what the Absolute Youth Leadership Academy did was teach augmented reality, it taught coding, but it did it by giving them always on access, both through their phones and through high-speed internet access and computers, to work on all these real cool projects. But it was done in the context of them starting a business. So they also learned how to pitch the app. They also learned how to work as a team. And if you go to Apps Youth Leadership Academy graduation, you can see that on YouTube, and you'll see the results of that kind of program. But as I was saying earlier, it was a 7-week intensive program. So that's how we're different from Generation Tech and also what Nifty does, but we're complementary in that as well. And if you'd been here this morning, you would have heard Kyle Kimball talk about how AYLA is basically a part of that larger system of how we're all getting kids to code.
Thank you.
And Silicon Harlem, as a company, right, is taking on a whole lot of initiatives. You know, education is one part of that. So just to give you some perspective, we have questions over here. Okay, let me get the mic to you.
Just wanted to add on to what you were talking about with the academy. So the next step after the academy is you have these entrepreneurs that graduate. So my question really is to start with Verizon. Do you guys have an incubator or venture fund like Google does?
Verizon has two major philanthropic themes that it focuses on. One is domestic violence, and the other is STEM. So the second major philanthropic piece of Verizon is to focus on science, technology, engineering, and math investments, whether through specific grants, sponsoring existing programs, startup programs. So absolutely, as far as
you don't have
incubators in specific, as I mentioned before. From this platform, we help support service at the Harlem Garage and certainly other incubators around the city, and certainly are interested in sponsoring more as well.
They also have a Skunk Works where what they do is they open up that facility to entrepreneurs who can look at new technologies that they could basically develop. That's more like sponsored venture development.
I'm going to just add, if I can add a point. So with Harlem Biospace, we also ran a program for high school students. It was open to all New York City high school students that come from mostly underserved communities, and they learned to build a solution to a global health problem. So we focused on a biomedical engineering problem. They built a company, and the two winning teams that are high school students, they are now incubating their idea at Harlem Biospace. So they've become members of Harlem Biospace. We don't know where that's going to go, but this is a pilot of something that we want to do that's bigger in terms of preparing the next generation of biotech entrepreneurs, particularly those in Harlem. And the two teams that are in Harlem Biospace right now, actually half the kids go to school in Harlem.
We have a question over here. Let me go right here.
Hi. So my question, I'm not a tech person at all. My name is Marion. I am not a tech person. I work for a tech startup. I am the only marketing person at the tech startup. So my question for all of you would just be, I find myself at a loss as far as marketing a tech product to non-tech savvy people. Do you have any programs that you're working on, or is this even something you've even thought about as far as giving the next round of, people that are interested in working in tech but aren't going to do the coding, how do you get them to understand or learn or just, know how to reach people with a tech product, if that even makes sense?
Well, by 2020, 85% of jobs will require a tech background. So it makes sense. It's a good question. Who wants to take it on? Bruce, you want to start out?
I mean, I don't train marketers. That's not my background. I thought you might want to respond to that. I'm a techno geek.
Well, there are resources. I don't think there's any necessarily a formal sort of generic program that's out there, but there are resources certainly available to everybody when it comes to, sort of getting your chops down on marketing in the technology sector. Today we had great sessions around social media, for example, and sort of what goes on with that. And for those who are trying to market almost anything, whether it's a tech product or any other product, we know that social media is really the marketing of the 21st century. we no longer have one-to-many, right? We have one-to-one marketing where people are talking back to you and helping you market. And probably the most successful thing you probably could start to look around at is sort of a transmedia approach, what we call a transmedia approach, which is a collaborative approach where your audience and yourself formulate the language around your product and service. So that's something we can talk about over a beer. Right. Let me come back here, and I'm going to come to you, though. I got you, Travis. We're not going nowhere. We're gonna take as many questions as we can.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Marsha Bonner. Thank you so much for being here. I had a couple of questions, but I think I want to get a definition for one of the questions. When you speak of community, what is community from your perspective as it relates to Harlem? Because right now we're a very diverse community, both generationally, as it relates to diversity of color. So when you speak of community, can you just define that? I'm sure I'm not going to get your name right, Mr. Harlem Biospace. But my question is, you simply stated, so that was the first question. I just want to get them all in right now. You simply stated that you came to Harlem for a few reasons. I'd be interested in knowing what those reasons are, because if we are here to, in some way, put together a strategy in order to entice others to come to Harlem, I'd like to hear what enticed you to come. And then I think the last question is for Verizon. I make a joke a lot of times about, I work to pay my cable bill. And obviously there are other people in the room that do the same thing.
That's right.
So my question to you specifically is this. With the community that we have that is struggling, I'm not being attacking in any way, so I hope the intent is sincere.
Absolutely.
Are there any initiatives in place where people who are struggling can take advantage of what might be passing them by, right, as it relates to the services that you offer?
Great question. So why don't I answer the tough question first?
The rent is too damn high.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd like to actually touch on, I'll touch on all your questions as I go through it. So for me, the community here in Harlem is the complete community. It is all the residents of Harlem. It is all the small business owners of Harlem. It's the large business owners of Harlem. It's the government agencies here. So it's, for Verizon in our, as I said, our past 100 years presence in supporting communication in this neighborhood, in this community, and for what we want to do in the next 100 years, it's continued to reach everyone. Now, the big change that's happened over the last so many years is, 100 years ago, it was only us. The New York Telephone Company was the only game in town. That's the only place you got your voice service from. If you didn't get it from us, you didn't have it from anybody else. So technology and competition has changed that dramatically. We now have wireless services available to us. We have it available to us from multiple providers. And as far as wireline access services, with the introduction of cable TV and cable companies, we have the availability of choice. Not complete choice yet, and that'll get to your last question. Not complete choice, yes. Now, technology-wise, as Time Warner Cable, who's the other competitor here that provides service, over the last so many years from technology, they've been able to do what we do. They were able to go from just being the cable TV company to be able to offer you voice services, to be able to offer you internet services. And what Verizon is doing with its Fios investment is trying to actually get on an equal competitive footing as far as the services that it offers today. Because where we don't have Fios, we're offering voice and we're offering internet, DSL or HSI service, as you may know it. And until we can complete this investment, we don't get to an equal platform of service. And what doesn't happen from that, take away the Time Warner names or the Verizon names, what doesn't happen is equal competition. So what we've seen happen thus far, and this is certainly why the city supported our entrance into the marketplace back in 2008 and the investment that we were looking here for a multitude of reasons. But one is they wanted to drive competition, because what we've seen happen throughout the 5 boroughs of the city is as we have wired, and as we have brought the Fios platform in competition, largely in the residential space, we have seen prices drop. We have seen innovation. So when we talk about, when you hear all the marketing words about speeds that can be offered, the different technology things that infrastructure can do now with storing services, with able to watch services through your tablet device in your home. You couldn't do these things just a few years ago. And the only reason these things happen now is because of competition. Otherwise, there would not have been a drive for the incumbent to either lower prices or innovate their services, for this. So it's the investment that's driving the technology investment. Now, as far as affordability across different ranges and what people are sorting out through, what I see happening in the cable TV scenario is the way that content is bundled together and paid for by cable TV companies and operators and then passed through their customers is I see that model changing over time. HBO just made a big announcement the other day that they're going to provide content through the internet, through streaming. I think we're going to continue to see more and more of that, and the general content model that exists in this country is going to be broken apart. When that gets broken apart, the pricing scenarios that exist today will also get broken apart, because today, when we go to purchase content from big providers, we have to buy what they want to sell. We can't necessarily always contract and pick and choose, and that's why we have 500 channels, because of some of the challenges in the marketplace of working through that. Now, that's not all the answers, and that's not the only solution, but I really see from a price and people being able to choose what they can afford, what they want to pay for with their dollar, I see over the next few years that changing dramatically. And we've begun to see that with certain aspects. And what we're looking at is we need to build the infrastructure. We need to make the investment in the infrastructure to be prepared to be future-proofed, so that we don't have to do this 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now, that we'll invest in the infrastructure that will go through this technological change and be able to provide the products that people want through the affordability that people want. Because if we make all these investments and no one buys our services, well, that doesn't make our investment very fruitful. So we've got to have an array of pricing, and we've got to have an array of products that we have an affordability. And as I said, we're making our investments to wire all of Harlem and every other part of the city, and we want to certainly have a community, and part of our community is a community of customers. And if we don't price our products appropriately, and if we don't have the right customer service provide our products and what people are paying for, then we're not going to have enough customers to support our investments. So I probably dominated that a little too much, but
no, I think
yeah.
From the city perspective, we certainly, like as you mentioned, right, also really value this goal of competition. It's part of why we partnered with the previous administration partnered with Verizon on the Fios build out, and the continued partnership, I think. Has been very helpful, I think, in many, many respects. I think and part of the reason we focus on competition is because of our concern for affordability. It's also why we've weighed in with respect to the Time Warner Comcast merger as well, because we're concerned about the impacts that might have on the climate in which everyone here is consuming this media, in which we're all working. I think the other side from our perspective is just making sure that our city residents are getting the best value for the money that they're shelling out for these services. And so to that end, we're very focused as well on accountability for all of our franchise partners and making sure that they're really delivering.
Go ahead, Sam.
Can I jump in as well? Yeah. So to your question about what is Harlem and why do we come to Harlem? So it certainly wasn't because of the rent, as some people thought. That was the reason, but it's certainly not. But I mean, there are sort of standard reasons that we give. Number one, we're anchored to the biggest university in New York City, which is Columbia. We have great public transportation here and so forth. All of that is true. We're, out of the 20 companies we have in our space right now, 17 are not from Columbia or City College. They're from other parts of the city. So we're really attracting new talented people to the area. It's easy to get to. But I think there's more subtle and maybe even more inspiring reasons we decided to come to Harlem. And that's really because I think, for a number of reasons. I think number one, biotech itself, a number of years in terms of innovation, the tech sector has been really doing a lot. But in terms of new drugs and so forth and new devices hasn't really happened. And they really need a new innovation model. And I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide that with what we've done so far and what we have planning coming up as well. And to do it in a place, we can do something like that in, try to do it in Midtown and Financial District. But to come up with really sort of a new innovative model for early stage biotech companies, to do it in Harlem actually is just really exciting. It's sort of really paired up nicely with what's going on in Harlem right now, just in terms of the transformation. And so it just turns out to be, I think, a very inspiring pairing of what we're trying to do that's really new, as well as the context here. And it's really, so what we found is that there's a lot of, the community is actually very open-minded. Another thing we didn't know was how we would be received. And, my other hat is I'm a Columbia faculty, and this is way before I was here, but I know there has been some history of some tension in the transformation in the community around Columbia. But maybe because of what has happened, some of those wars have been fought. That and as we can see here today, this community is really welcoming of tech and new technology. As long as we respect the history and the culture of the community and engage everyone here, there's a certain level of open-mindedness and innovation that I think is a little bit lost if we are just located in Midtown or the Financial District. So I think that's another part of the story that we hope to continue on here, not only in some of our work in really promoting early stage biotech companies, but also in some of our educational initiatives, which, because again, I'm not sure that I've seen too many places where there's been this intersection of life science, entrepreneurship, community, and then education. Usually you have some, mix of those four ingredients, but to have the kids come in, and that's really our way of engaging the community, and for them to not only, consider not only just mobile app, but actually consider, hey, maybe I can do something, whether it's the sponge from one of our companies, Ex Vivo Dynamics, or maybe I can do this too. We've got plants growing. That's how they're making these Ebola drugs these days, if it works at all. And we have one of our companies growing that in our space. You can see it. So it's inspiring for the kids to see that this is not something that is, number one, inaccessible to them. A hard problem like that is actually accessible to them. And actually, back to a question here about prototyping spaces, we're very interested in that problem as well. And so we're in our new space, hopefully in Harlem, we will have a maker space that will be open to everyone in some way or another. So to provide the kids with that sort of ability to not just learn what's going on, but to see that there's a path forward with the companies, with the startups, some of the best startups in the region, in fact, I think that kind of innovative model as well, even for education, is something we really find works uniquely in a place like Harlem versus, say, Midtown.
So I want to be respectful of time, because I know our experts here have the same mission that I have, which is to get out to the bar. So in that, I'm going to sort of let them say some final words about anything they want. This has been a wonderful conference. We do have one last short question over here from Broderick, who's mouthing me the whole time.
Thank you, brother. I want to piggyback on a question that was asked about the cost. And it's a very brief question with a very brief answer. And it really goes to Chris and Brittny. Is competition the answer to net neutrality?
I think there is a very close relationship between those two things. So, for example, in our public statements around the merger, we've also cited the impact of the merger, right, on net neutrality. I think that there is, in fact, a connection. I think there's a kind of wonkier policy answer to like what the solution is. I think competition is part of it. I think the appropriate regulatory bodies exercising their full power is also part of it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misleading commentary about what truly net neutrality is all about. And if you certainly go and study our conversation on it, we have felt pretty strong about the way that we think the whole ecosystem needs to be working and managing things, because there's a lot of participants in the ecosystem that run their businesses over other people's investments. So there needs to be sort of an equal, matching and meeting of things and investment, and it goes through that's just, that's fair and appropriate and not balanced in one way or another. So Verizon is certainly not looking for advantages and is not looking to be anti-competitive in any nature with regard to the subject of net neutrality, is just looking for, what would seem balanced and appropriate of how to manage a very large and very complex total ecosystem. So
there's another element that never gets discussed, which is if we can build out the next generation internet and ultra broadband network, then some of these things will go away, because you will have enough dedicated bandwidth for all these different uses that we now put the internet to. So there's also, how do we drive innovation that basically advances the overall internet and gets us to where we have this always on-demand network. And that's what I alluded to earlier. Some of those innovations are being developed at Columbia and at the University of Arizona at their optical sciences lab. So they're looking at innovations that will make sure all of us can be always on with our wireless devices. It will connect back to the fiber backbone, but everyone will have the bandwidth they need for what they need, when they need it, and will also lower costs. So there's some engineering dimensions to this that never enter into either the policy discussion or the competition discussion.
Okay, I know we have more questions. We're going to try to hang out for a little while. But I want to wrap it up. I'm going to have your panelists say maybe some parting words if you want. We have a meetup happening right after this in partnership with the New York Tech Meetup. We're very excited about that. So let's get right to it. Chris, why don't you start us out?
I appreciate having been part of the conversation multiple times. I look forward to our next get-together.
This is just the beginning. Think of this as a launch pad where we're all taking off together, and we're going to go on this journey, and we're going to achieve our goals within a short amount of time.
So I just want to thank everyone here for, I think, the great event, and I'm always happy to really talk to anyone. My email address is on the website. Harlem Biospace is right there, so you can just email me or anyone else there. I'd love to talk to any of you more.
And I'll close by answering part of your question that I intended to answer, which was kind of why are we here, why Harlem? And I think so we were so excited to participate in this today because we appreciate kind of the diversity of expertise in this room and the uniqueness of seeing a room that looks like this with this combination of expertise and kind of deep commitment to the kind of goals that we've discussed today. So thank you so much for having us part of this conversation.
Let's give them a great big hand. We have to thank our sponsors one more time, Horowitz Research, Verizon, Carver Bank. We are very appreciative of their support. Thank all the speakers. They came from all over parts of the country talking about some phenomenal subjects. A lot of this has been recorded, so you'll see it on our website for those who weren't able to make it for the whole day. We are now going to go into our meetup with our partners, New York Tech Meetup, right out here at the bar. But feel free to hang out anywhere you want in this place. Tonight is your night. Thank you very much. It's been a great conference. Thank you.